That I found you, stay and let me love you, baby.
We are gathered here this evening to join Pelin and Brett in the sacred bond of marriage. I like this light on.
Okay. Sorry.
Matrimony is not to be entered into lightly, but thoughtfully and seriously, with a deep realization of its obligations and responsibilities. Relationships are a fine dance, a counterbalance of sometimes competing personalities and ideals. As a ballerina on point, who seems to her audience to be a vision of balance and grace, minuscule adjustments of her toes keep her upright. Similarly, in a marriage, tiny compromises, like waiting 45 minutes, keep the relationship afloat. Compromise and counterbalance are the art of marriage. Love, loyalty, empathy, and understanding are the cornerstones of an enduring home. When Pelin, Brett, and I met last week, we talked about a very powerful symbol called a hugging tree. A hugging tree is a tree that, by a natural phenomenon called inosculation, it interweaves and grows side by side, or sometimes wraps around and grows from the center. And we talked about this tree, and I described how this phenomenon is very much like Pelin and Brett. Here you have two individual trees with deep roots, individual beliefs in faith and family and culture and language. But together they weave and they grow. Inosculated trees can grow taller than the tallest redwoods in the forest. And I spoke with them about this idea that when you take deep-rooted people and you interweave them, they can grow further than either could have imagined before. Brett and Pelin have asked that I ask for their declaration of intent in both Turkish and English. I will do my best. We'll start with Brett. Brett? Pelini iyi günde kötü günde hastalıkta ve sağlıkta eşin alarak kabul ediyor musun?
Evet ediyorum.
Pelin? Brett'i iyi günde kötü günde hastalıkta ve sağlıkta eşin alarak kabul ediyor musun?
Ediyorum.
Now in English. Do you, Brett, take Pelin to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to support her and nurture her in sickness and in health, in joyfulness and in woe, for richer and for poorer, forsaking all others as long as you both shall live?
Yes.
Do you, Pelin, take Brett to be your lawfully wedded husband? Do you promise to support him and nurture him in sickness and in health, in joyfulness and in woe, for richer and for poorer, forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live?
I do.
Pelin and Brett have prepared vows that they would like to exchange with one another. And Brett, I'll ask you to begin.
Brett, oh my God.
Like many men, I suffer from a crippling disorder called aromanticitis. And during my flare-ups, my symptoms manifest themselves with a lack of romantic expression against romance-inducing stimuli. In layman's terms, Pelin often accuses me of coldness in faced with situations that she finds romantic. She often finds the ideas of kissing on top of the Empire State Building as well as ice skating in Rockefeller Center and proposes them to me, expecting me to, oh, how romantic. And then when I don't express as much romance, she gets mad. I've made great strides in trying to overcome the disorder, and I think many times, like surprising you in New York, surprising you with all sorts of things that I'm working on this aromanticitis. So I'd love to share with you all today my progress in preparing a vow that's romantic and leapy, but in keeping with my diagnosis, I'd like to regale you all with a story instead. When we often think about a love story, when trying to find the beginning of a love story, we often find ourselves in a pickle. The end of a love story sometimes is much harder to locate. Oftentimes we know the end result of a love story, but it's hard to know when that love became brittle and crumbled through. Oftentimes when we think about the beginning of a love story, we think we can look back, that's the moment I fell in love. That's the moment I fell in love. That's the moment I fell in love. With Pelin, there's thousands of moments that I fell in love, so it's really hard to choose, actually, which moment it was. However, as you all know, Pelin and I met in Anqing, China. A Jewish boy from from Maryland.
Same thing.
Same thing. A Turkish girl from China, from Turkey, meeting in China. It's really a story that when we repeat it, we often feel like we're lying, but this is the simple truth. Anqing, China is a rural village of 6 million, because villages in China still are 6 million strong, that has none of the allure of traditional romantic settings. There's no Venetian or Parisian walks. For our romantic setting, we had a cement factory that infused the air with dust and grit, and sweltering air-conditioned-less classrooms littered with the carcasses of bats and bugs. To any other observer, this place ought to have killed off any chance at love blossoming. But yet this is where we found love. This is where we had our first snuggles, our first kisses, our first fights. First everything. We had a dog together. We had our own little rhythm. Although it was like a wonderland, this is where the shape of our love started to take place. Anqing is not a place, though, that love does blossom, generally speaking, but our love blossomed here. It sprouted out of the ground and grit, and now I'm being melodramatic. On my second day of arriving in Anqing, I called my parents up and threatened to ruin their household tranquility by returning home early. I'm glad I didn't follow up on that threat for more reasons than one. So in China, where love is often subjected to many trials and tests, to change gears a bit, it's not uncommon as well for your dinner to wreak havoc on your insides. And this, coupled with the general lack of Western-style toilets, makes every meal a bit of a gamble. One day, some months into our burgeoning relationship, it strikes me. My biggest mistake then was not, however, going for that extra guess-the-meat dumpling, but rather informing Pelin of my condition. I'd already fallen ill once before, and she had already taken care of me, as she likes to remind me, by staying up all night by my bedside and caring for me. However, this time, as soon as I tell her of my gastro condition, she spryly runs out of the room, claiming to have just a ticket for curing me. I should have known at that moment to run, but my naivety still reigned. I'm clutching my abdomen when she returns, wishing the pain away, when Pelin comes creeping in, sneaks up to me, and I barely have a moment to turn around and say baby before she introduces me to what would become the biggest nemesis of my life: Turkish coffee. As someone that would rather drink antifreeze than a cup of steaming joe, and I'm sorry to all you coffee lovers, Turkish coffee is not just regular coffee, but it's coffee on steroids. She shoves the grounds down my throat. I immediately spit out the grounds. My throat is closing up. The end is near. I'm screaming at her, "Why do you do this? You are evil. You are evil." She stood by impassive, explaining that it would do away with my gastro issues right away. I said, "What a bunch of schlock malarkey." I kick her out of the room. Dramatizing a little bit for dramatic effect, but essentially I was not a happy camper to have received a fistful of Turkish grounds. But lo and behold, it does do the trick, and it does do away with my issues. I'm sure I'll be saying this a lot more times during our marriage, but she was right. And so, and so I realized. So, Turkish coffee did make its appearance at the engagement ceremony, where the groom is expected. Marrying a Turkish girl is always a series of tests, and one of the tests is to down a cup of salty Turkish coffee. So not only is it coffee, but it's salty tuzlu kafe. However, Pelin struck me a deal saying that she wouldn't put the salt in, she would just have it coffee, which I thought I could do as well, but ultimately did not succeed in. Still passed the test for my valiant effort. But I realized from this story that marriage, even though Pelin is kind and caring and brave, I mean, she is brave. She went to China not knowing a lick of Chinese. I mean, zilch. Not even a ni hao could she spit out before she decided to go to China. So she went in there, traveled abroad many times, but she holds me to a higher standard. And she knows what's right for me sometimes when I can't see when I just want to spite my nose for my face. So despite the fact that she's also kind and beautiful and all those wonderful things, she holds me to a high standard, and she has expectations of me, and she sets... It's wrapping up, Mother. That's why I'm in Toastmasters. I'm Toastmaster president for this very reason, for my verboseness. But she holds high expectations of me, and although sometimes I don't always agree with those expectations, I know that it's just because she wants me to become a better man, and not only with my interactions with her, but with my family and the greater community. So I pledge to her that when that second test comes around and that double jug of Turkish coffee needs to be drunk, I will do it drunk myself. I will do it indeed for her, because Turkish coffee is the panacea to all the world's ills. Thank you, Pelin, for agreeing to marry me. Turkish coffee.
No, in Turkish.
Not Turkish coffee. This whole thing in Turkish.
No, just
No.
some of that.
Okay. Ooh. I don't even know how to speak English.
Promise to respect your choice of music in the car when you are driving, when you don't, however.
In Turkish.
Oh yeah, sure. Burada gözünün içerisine baktığım zaman senin hakkında sevdiğim her şeyi bir kez daha görmüş oluyorum. Sana iyi günde, kötü günde, fakirlikte, zenginlikte seninle beraber olacağıma, sana destek vereceğime ve seni koruyacağıma söz veriyorum. Sana her zaman iyi bir eş olacağıma, aynı zamanda daha da iyi bir arkadaş olacağıma söz veriyorum. Ben Pelin, seni eşim olarak kabul ediyorum. Sana her zaman saygı duyacağıma söz veriyorum. Araba kullanırken dinlediğim müziklere de tolerans göstereceğime söz vermeyi temin ediyorum.
Thank you, promise. Thank you, promise.
Okay.
It's really, I have to say, it's a magical thing. A multilingual household is a magical thing. How many ways can you say "you're right, dear"?
You could say it probably
What?
6 different ways.
Yeah.
One
Okay,
with the
so-
diamond earrings.
Now we're going to exchange rings. Before we do, I actually have them right here. It represents the cycle of life, the repeating patterns we fall into. Days pass into nights, weeks into months, months into years. And as a couple, Pelin and Brett, you'll prevail through these cycles together. All of the celestial bodies are spherical. The sun rises and sets in predictable rhythm, and these cycles, these circadian rhythms, they ground us. So like the predictable sunrise, Pelin, you'll be a source of warmth for Brett. Like the light of the moon, Brett, you'll shelter Pelin from the darkness. A circle also represents one of the strongest shapes in architecture, right? The semicircular aqueducts in ancient Rome have stood through the centuries. So likewise, Pelin and Brett, may your marriage endure the torments of time and weather any storm. Along with being unbroken circles, your rings are made of precious metal, steeped not only in their physical value, but also in their emotional weight. Pelin and Brett, may all of this symbolism be brought to mind when you gaze upon the rings which I ask you to exchange with each other here and now. That's Pelin's. And I'm going to ask you to place the ring on the left ring finger of your partner. And on your rightest one. Your love for one another can be the light that peels back the clouds. May your lives be filled with laughter, joy, and true friendship. For where there is laughter, love cannot be far behind. By the power vested in me by the state of Maryland, Sizi kari koja ilane dioram elvisinis. I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride.
How do you do that?
Ladies and gentlemen.